Hey, what is going on, Xbox and PC fans? We have yet more news today on the GPU and gaming fronts, so sit back, relax, and let's get into it. With the recently launched RX 480 from AMD and the imminent release of the sub $200 RX 470 and sub $100 RX 460, it is obvious that AMD is trying to capture back market share in a big way from the low end up. While the top end RX 480 has been essentially crowned as the current champion in price performance, nVidia is looking to change that, and very soon. They have pushed up the release of their GTX 1060 substantially to counter AMD's momentum and hopefully entice gamers to spend just a little bit more on what is supposed to be an even better performing GPU. nVidia is set to hold a special event for the new chip in just a few days' time on July the 7th, with a retail release following soon thereafter on July 13th. Thanks again to CF Natural for pointing this out today. Appreciate you, bro. Now, there is no doubt that nVidia have had and continue to have some seriously efficient GPUs, and the new GTX 1070 and 1080 are no different. Both of these GPUs benefiting greatly, obviously, from the die shrink down to 16 nanometer for even greater efficiency than the previous Maxwell generation of GPUs. And things will be no different for the little brother here in the GTX 1060, also based on NVIDIA's Pascal architecture and being fabricated on that new 16 nanometer node from TSMC. Now, this card will be cut down in terms of its functional resources on the GPU, so the GTX 1060 will require even less power than NVIDIA's own GTX 1070 or AMD's RX 480, and should perform and be priced somewhere in between those two cards. While this could put further pressure on AMD to provide even more compelling performance per dollar in that sub $250 market, with their already aggressive pricing of the RX series of cards, we'll have to keep in mind that we'll soon be seeing increased competition from add-in board partners as well, with those RX 480 based cards due out very soon with even greater performance and headroom than the reference-based cards from AMD themselves. But speaking on the GTX 1060 specifically, early reports have it beating AMD's latest by about 15% in performance. Of course, these are unconfirmed and rumors, speculation, or whatever you want to call it for the time being, and we will have to wait until the 7th until that NDA is lifted for some truly valid numbers from reviewers, etc. But it wouldn't surprise me to see this card performing better than the RX 480 in DX11 titles, and then honestly getting beaten in upcoming titles that will utilize DX12 or Vulkan, and therefore make use of AMD's proprietary async compute engines. NVIDIA's new Pascal-based boards should see a boost in performance as well in those titles, with preemption being much, much better than the old full of holes Swiss cheese graphics pipeline that we had before. But from all the tests that we've seen from the higher end GTX 10 series cards and now AMD's latest with respect to the new APIs, it certainly looks like AMD has the most potential for growth in terms of performance, and it looks to be substantial when those features are activated, giving anywhere between 20 and 30% and even sometimes greater than that performance boost when utilizing asynchronous compute in those situations. So should be interesting to see, how those two cards perform relative to one another when they're launched in most titles, and also how they perform relative to one another down the line when more titles are using newer APIs and those features together. So we'll see how that goes. But as far as pricing is concerned, I wouldn't put it past nVidia to price this card somewhere around $279 and maybe even below that to try and combat AMD's plans for the sub $300 market domination. And as long as the bulk of titles being played are still reliant on DX11, I think they'll be able to justify that to a lot of consumers with just better performance than what AMD is able to offer for the same amount of money, or slightly less for most of those titles. But again, we'll have to see on that on the 7th. These cards are supposed to ship in two configurations, one packing 6GB of VRAM and the other packing only 3GB of VRAM, and also having its SLI support taken away completely, which, while I agree that a pair of 3GB cards should not be used for running high-res gaming, it's possible with a pair of those cards as far as computing performance. I do think it's a little light just in general as well. 3GB of VRAM is just not adequate in my opinion, even for 1080p gaming at different quality settings, higher quality settings, with textures, being able to be pushed now with a lot of engines implementing things like texture scaling, etc. Most of the time you're able to go well beyond 3GB of VRAM, even in 1080p, so I just don't understand how they're able to even justify releasing a $250 or $300, next generation GPU that has that little amount of VRAM in it. But that's up to them obviously, but I would not recommend that lower end card on the GTX 1060 personally, unless you just get an absolutely smoking deal on that, or if you're doing very fast FPS gaming at 1080p on a higher hertz refresh rate monitor, and you want to run those lower settings and get some really killer high FPS, that could be a great solution there as well. But for general consumers that are trying to get prettier and prettier graphics, I don't think it's a good, feasible situation. We will see when those things come out in just about a week. Now, also there is talk about the add-in board partner cards finally being released here very, very soon for the RX 480. These babies are due out any minute, and they look to be substantially better in design and performance than the reference models. Partially due, in my opinion, to the fact that AMD, again, have likely printed out just a ton of a single card for the RX 480 and RX 470 and all the variations that they have for those cards, with nothing more than a different VBIOS to tell those cards essentially what they are. How much RAM and how much GPU resources to unlock and the speed of what to run those at. But again, I believe those are all the exact same cards, and when that RX 470 comes out here in a couple of weeks, we will find out if I'm right or wrong. But with that being the case, the RX 480 is the top end of that product stack, and it's going to need the most power, obviously, of any of those cards. And, I just think because they wanted to try and cut manufacturing cost and put out a single card and get these cards to market as fast as possible, that they have just included a single 6-pin for all of those cards. And if you're not going to overclock your RX 480, that is ample power, and it does give you a limited amount of headroom there for overclocking, but the add-in board partner cards should remedy this. A lot of those cards, again, due out very, very soon, and most of them including an 8-pin power connector from the power supply unit itself, giving you an additional 75 watts of headroom over the standard design with a 6-pin power connector. So that should be completely ample for just beastly overclocks as high as that GPU will go. That's more than enough juice to give it before it explodes and just tells you no more. But these partner cards look absolutely sweet. Leaks of the new XFX and Sapphire cards, both showing expanded I/O options with the reintroduction of DVI, which is a great thing. I don't know why AMD removed this, especially in the lower end market of the GPU kind of segment. Most of those consumers are not going to have $1,000 monitors, and they're going to want to plug these things in, possibly with HDMI, yes, possibly DisplayPort, but certainly DVI should be included in my opinion, and these add-in board partners have added that back into the fold, so that's awesome. Along with better cooling, higher clock speeds, and more available power brought to you courtesy of that 8-pin power cable. These things should be ready to rock, and they look awesome. One such card is the Sapphire RX 480 8GB OC Nitro, and that is an absolute mouthful, but this card looks sweet. It looks awesome, and it's supposed to launch, rumors have it launching closer to 1400 megahertz out of the box. That kind of available power and cooling, I would not doubt it. However, it has been confirmed already that this card will indeed be a 175 watt part as opposed to the 150 of the reference design, making use of the extra power right out of the gate before overclocking at all. So obviously that card will draw some more juice, but the higher clock rates may get us up there to the kind of the vaunted RX 390X and GTX 980 performance level that we were all kind of looking for before those cards launched. So we'll see how that goes for the partner cards, but I have my fingers crossed and things look very good. Now, other add-in board partners are claiming substantially higher clock speeds again than the reference design, but even higher than the Sapphire OC Nitro card, claiming that some of these RX 480s can get all the way up to 1600 megahertz with better cooling and more power, which would be amazing. Of course, I'll believe that when I see it, but hoping that can happen. That would be just awesome. Moving on to some more concerning topics now, there are other, hopefully temporary issues regarding both AMD and NVIDIA. As you guys know, AMD's RX 480 has been using in certain scenarios more than it should in terms of power from the PCIe slot on the motherboard, and with only one 6-pin power cable coming from the PSU, AMD are going to essentially have to restructure how that card draws power. And they're going to have to kind of sway the balance over from 50-50, which is what it looks like now essentially, 50% from the rail, the other half coming from the PSU, to more of a weighted scenario where the card is pulling more of its juice, especially in situations that require more than the standard amount from the PSU directly. Again, there's been much higher spikes on other cards in the past, so not really concerning in my mind. But still, AMD has, come out and said that they're going to address this literally when everyone gets back to work on Tuesday with a simple driver fix. So it sounds like a very, very easy fix for them, just with a driver. But of course, I will check that out as soon as it's available and let you guys know, how that patch works out in terms of fixing that power draw situation. But if you have a reference RX 480, I certainly wouldn't worry about that. And unless you have the cheapest motherboard known to man, I don't think that's going to happen. People are going to say they're going to burn out their motherboards or whatever with this card, but that's just not likely to happen. But at any rate, so for NVIDIA, their concerns are less direct and certainly a good problem to have. While the GTX 1070 is now available at most retailers, the prices are a bit higher than the 379 number that we'd hope to see, hovering more around the $450 to $500 mark, but at least they are available. Things not so good, however, if you're trying to score the current top dog in the market with the GTX 1080 in such high demand. Supply just continues to be outstripped by demand, and resellers are making a killing on these things. At first, it appeared that TSMC or NVIDIA may have an issue with production on that new 16nm node, but that does not appear to be the case. With ample volume of these cards going out to retailers, they still cannot keep these things in stock, and as a result, if you're trying to pick up one of these GTX 1080s, you're probably going to pay closer to $1,000 than anything remotely resembling the $599 asking price that NVIDIA had set for its non-Founders Edition cards of the GTX 1080s initially. However, not all is lost. If you're looking to get that kind of performance and you don't have money growing out of your ears, things like Crossfire and SLI support becoming more and more supported. Hopefully, savvy consumers can still achieve the relative performance of the GTX 1080 by pairing together two RX 480s or soon to be released 6GB variants of the GTX 1060s. Or even greatly exceeding that performance by going with a pair of GTX 1070s for around the same price as you'd grab one of these cards for, at least presently. So we do have some options here, and those 1070s are available now, albeit for a slightly higher price than I would have liked. That's still a tremendous amount of performance for the same price you'd get for a single GTX 1080, at least at this time. So that's what I would do personally, but that is just me. Now, fingers crossed that the new GTX 1060s make their way out to the retail channels soon and will be widely available and will actually sell for the prices that NVIDIA sets for these cards. Hopefully the partner cards for AMD's RX 480 will also be much better overclockers with the additional power headroom and cooling from the add-in board partners there, and give us that 390X 980 type performance we're looking to see. And hopefully I'm also right about the RX 470s being the exact same card, that we can all download a BIOS update for and have a fully equipped 8GB VR ready card for $150. That would just be freaking amazing. So we'll find out very, very soon. Until then, I hope you guys all have a great and safe 4th, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.